So welcome to today's session on creating year-end accounts on receipts and payments basis. If your charity creates accounts on an accruals basis, then we run a separate lunch and learn session for this, and that is next Thursday at 12:30. So if you run on an accruals basis, we won't be upset if you leave the session now. That is totally up to you. If you're not sure what accounting basis your charity has previously used, then you can view submitted accounts for previous years on the Charity Commission website, and the accounting basis that has been used should be stated within those accounts. Now, unless your charity is a charitable company, then typically if your annual income is under £250,000, then you're likely to create accounts on a receipts and payments basis. This threshold will be increasing to £500,000 for charity accounts where the year end is on or after the 30th of September 2026. So if you've seen that news, that is when that is changing. Receipts and payments accounts are a simplified form of accounting where money is accounted for based simply on the date it is received in or paid out of your bank account. And the advantage of that is that it's simpler to understand, it's much easier to create accounts with far less disclosures that have to be considered and included. So in today's session, we're going to cover three things. We're going to cover the key checks and tasks that are needed before you create your accounts. We'll also cover how to use the brilliant inbuilt end-of-year reporting template within ExpensePlus to create your accounts. And we'll cover what to do once you have created those accounts in terms of independent examination and filing your accounts with the Charity Commission. As I talk through the steps required, if you hear me refer to 2025, then this is the financial year that we are creating accounts for. And if that is what you're planning to do, you will obviously need to wait until January to do this as we're still in 2025. But if you hear me talk about 2025, we're talking about this financial year. And if you hear me talk about the prior year, then I'll be referring to 2024, and the same for if Sam mentions the years as well. Final thing to mention before we dive in is just to say that no two churches or charities are the same. So please do contextualize and customize what we cover today for your organization. So in this first section, In this first section, we're going to be covering the key checks and tasks that are needed before you create your accounts. To help with this, we've created that free checklist that you can download and customize for your charity. You can find this in the Zoom chat, or if you're watching on record, the link will be in the video description. Now, in terms of creating your accounts, if you have been reconciling transactions during the financial year as you have been going along, as most charities will be, then as you'll see today, what you need to do at year end isn't such a big deal as maybe the task sounds. While you have Another thing, while you have 10 months after your financial year ends to file your accounts with the Charities Commission, it's worth accounting for the time that will be needed for things such as writing your trustee report, your trustees to meet, for your independent examiner to review your accounts, and for the sign off and submission of your accounts as well. So don't leave them up to 5 or 6 weeks before the deadline. It's worth getting a head start on creating your accounts. Now, we've already mentioned that when accounting on a receipts and payments basis, it's the date that money comes into or goes out of the bank account that matters in terms of the income and expenditure shown within your accounts. Therefore, as you head into the last month of your financial year, you may wish to try and firstly receive into your bank account any money that you're owed. So that might be gift aid claims that are due in or chasing any outstanding customer invoices, but also making sure that you pay out of your bank account any money you owe. So that might include encouraging those who are owed expenses to submit their claims in time and to pay any supplier invoices in a timely way before year end as well. So let's take a look at the checklist. So I'll give you a couple of seconds just to find that checklist while I navigate to sharing my screen. So this checklist has 10 key things you need to do before you create your year-end accounts. The checklist that I'm going to be working through, as mentioned, is linked in the Zoom chat, and we'll include it in the follow-up email after this session. We're going to work through the checklist in order, and we highly recommend that you do this too, as there are dependencies between some of these checks. So doing them in order will really help make sure that everything moves smoothly. So we're going to start with number one, our opening balances. Now, as I'm sure you will know, your closing balances in terms of your charity's financial position at year end carry forward to become your opening balances for the next financial year. It's therefore important to check your prior year balances within Expense Plus match with your submitted accounts from the prior financial year. So your 2024 financial accounts match your opening balances on Expense Plus. The best way to check this is using your assets and liability statement. So we're going to go to our finance reports and we're going to find the asset and liability statement. And in here, you can see your prior year figures here. You need to make sure that they match with your end of year accounts for the prior year. If there are any issues, it's really important to fix these, obviously. Typically, issues could occur when someone has made adjustments outside of Expense Plus when creating your accounts. So we've got 3 handy tips to avoid this happening. The first one is to complete this checklist that we're going through before creating your year-end accounts, as this will minimize the need for any adjustments during the review stage of creating your accounts. Number 2, before signing off your accounts, to always compare the assets and liability statements in your accounts with what is in Expense Plus and add any additions or changes into Expense Plus at the point of sign off. And thirdly, you are able to lock your financial year within Expense Plus. And this is great because it prevents accidental changes after the accounts have been signed off. And we'll cover how to do this a little bit later in the session. If your prior year wasn't on Expense Plus, then you'll be able to see your opening balances within the opening fund balances screen. So if you go to your settings and you go to your funds, you'll be able to view and edit your opening balances in this screen. The second thing that we then want to look at on our checklist is our bank transactions. So Expense Plus is bank statement driven, which means that if you have uploaded your bank transactions correctly, either by manual upload or the automated feed, your bank balance at the end of the financial year, at the end of 2025, should match the balance on your actual bank statements. And that should be the case for each of your bank accounts within the bank reconciliation module. And we will navigate to that now so that we can see our bank accounts. So your closing balance should match what is in your actual bank account. This is one of the key checks that your independent examiner should do, and therefore it's one of the key checks you should do at the start of this checklist. If you have set up any payment processor accounts within Expense Plus, then you also need to ensure that the end of year balances on Expense Plus are correct for those as well. As you can see, the Stripe account in this screen. Next, you need to check that all transactions for the year have been reconciled. If you have a payment processor accounts where transactions are uploaded retrospectively, then it's worth waiting a couple of weeks after your year end to create your accounts, just to ensure you don't miss any income or expenditure for the prior year. So I can see that I haven't got any transactions to match in my Stripe account, but if I go into our main Lloyds account, I can see there is a transaction and the date is within 2025. It's within the financial year that I want to create accounts for. So I'm going to make sure that I match that transaction and that is all completed for me. The third thing on our checklist is to check our petty cash accounts. So if you use petty cash, then petty cash income and expenditure hopefully has been recorded during the financial year within the petty cash screen. And if not, now is the point you need to add any missing petty cash transactions. As a final check, you should ensure that your petty cash balances, again, similar to your bank accounts, you want to check that your petty cash balances match with the petty cash that you physically hold at year end. That involves obviously a physical check of what is being held in your petty cash tin or in the drawer that you have for your petty cash, however you keep that securely, that is up to you. Check number 4, we want to look at our purchase receipts. So receipts within Expense Plus are obviously digital, and they should have been uploaded and checked as part of your regular finance process flow. At year end, it's really important that all receipts relating to the financial year have been checked and none are still showing on the receipt screen. So we're going to navigate to our receipt screen and see, okay, I've got one receipt that still needs checking. So I'm going to have a look into it. I'm going to view the purchase. I can see what the receipt is. Fabulous. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to submit that purchase. And that will then move through for approval and then for payment. For this purpose, it's also a good opportunity to check which receipts haven't been provided and to upload any additional receipts that you might have. Now, we have a really brilliant report that you can use for this. within this receipts module, and it's by clicking on this view purchases without receipts. In here, you can see which purchases don't have a receipt, and you can also see what reason has been given for that. So it might be that you have a lost receipt and it's been authorized, and that's fine. It might be that you have a purchase where a receipt is not required, or you might have some purchases where a receipt just hasn't been uploaded yet, and that's one that you might want to chase up. Now, to know if you started using Expense Plus mid-financial year and you have all the receipts from prior to using Expense Plus on paper or in a cabinet, then do contact our support team who can mark those receipts as being held outside of Expense Plus for you. Number 5 on our checklist is our income documentation. So as well as uploading documents for purchases, you will also need to provide documentation for any grants or legacies and maybe any large donations that you receive. Your independent examiner is likely to want to view these, so we'd recommend that you do upload them to Expense Plus, which you can do very easily by clicking on the relevant transaction. So a good way to identify any grants, legacies, large donations where this may be needed is to use our transactions by amount report. So again, we're going to go to our finance reports and find our transactions by amount. And this will list our largest transactions at the top. And we can see here we have some pretty large donations here. We've got a national lottery grant. And in here, if I want to add documentation, I can just click on this icon and I can go into my files and select something that I want to add for that. And that will be really helpful for your independent examiner. We're flying through these. This is great. Check number 6, recording of transactions. So if, like most organizations, you are checking your financial reports each month and as you go, then this check shouldn't take you too long, which is great news. You're looking to check that transactions have been recorded correctly, specifically that transactions have been recorded to the correct fund. For this check, you could go to the view statement screen within bank reconciliation, and you could then select the start of your financial year and go through month by month, checking each transaction has been coded to the right place. You can do that if you would like to. Obviously start at January and work your way through to December if your financial year is January to December. Alternatively, you might choose to use the income and expenditure reports within Expense Plus. So if we go back to our financial reports and we look at our summary by fund report, this will help us be able to identify a few of those things that we are kind of looking out for when we check our transactions and how they've been recorded. So firstly, we want to check if you have if you have a category that might be called other or to be recoded for transactions that maybe you aren't quite sure at the time what they relate to or which category they should go into. This is a category that we want to make sure is kind of clear at the end of year. So I can see that in my Z other transactions to be recoded, I do have a purchase, I have a utility bill that needs recoding. You want to make sure that that is recoded to the right fund, the right category, because because it's what you want to do. It's really important to have that in the right place, and we want to have that category empty. You also want to check that any restricted income hasn't been recorded into an unrestricted or designated fund. So if we check that in our general fund, whether there's any categories here that look like they don't belong in general income, they might be a category that belongs in restricted income. Anything where a grant that is restricted has been allocated within general funds, it might be something we want to have a look at and move out. Now, you also want to check that expenditure out of restricted funds are in line with what the money was given for. So if we go to our buildings fund and check our restricted fund, we'll have a look in here and see, have we recorded the right kind of expenditure to this fund? And now in here, we've got an expenditure category for our building fund that is called weekend away costs. Now that's one where I'm going to query, is that to do with the building fund? Is that a good use, or is it an appropriate use of this restricted fund, or has this simply just been coded incorrectly? And like I said, there's weekend away refreshments. It's unlikely that that is related to our building fund, and I might want to reallocate that transaction into the right fund and the right category. And then the final thing that we want to check in this section is that any expenditure that can be covered by restricted funds hasn't been recorded to an unrestricted fund. We want to use restricted funds first for their purpose. So that might, for example, be where you have spent money on your roof repair, but you've actually coded it to maybe in your general fund, a buildings maintenance category, something like that, where you could actually use your building fund to cover that cost, but it's been allocated to the general fund. Can happen when you've got categories that have similar sounding names or have similar purposes, but you want to make sure you're thinking about which fund that is being paid for out of. Check number 7 then is our category transfers. So if any category transfers have been added, you just want to check that these have been recorded correctly. And for this, you'll need to go to the category transfer screen, which we can navigate to through the adjustments module. And we can view our category transfers. If you've got anything in here, you're just making sure that all of those details are correct and that they are in the right. Everything is correct in there for your category transfers. Obviously, none in here for me today. Category transfers within ExpensePlus are brilliant because ExpensePlus prevents you from creating transfers that will result in you overinflating your income and expenditure in your year-end accounts. If you'd like to find out more about category transfers, then do check out our brilliant online help guide for more information. In a similar way, check number 8 is all about fund transfers. So if any fund transfers have been added, you want to check that these also have been recorded correctly. And to do this, again, you can navigate there from the adjustments module by clicking. When it loads up, we can click on our fund transfers here. We can view and edit our fund transfers. An example of a fund transfer might be if your trustees have decided they want to increase your reserves fund by £5,000, you can add this as a fund-to-fund transfer. And please note, just remember, when you're reviewing these, typically you should not be transferring money out of a restricted fund. So that would be anything that comes out of a restricted fund would be something to keep a keen eye on and maybe review whether that transfer has been recorded correctly. Check number 9, we're racing through, we're doing really well. Our additional assets and liabilities. So in your year-end accounts, in addition to including the cash assets of your church or charity, you can also state other assets or liability balances. Now, this is done within the assets and liability statement report, which again can be found within our finance reports module. And we'll just bring that up now. Within this, you can see your cash assets at the top. You might also want to record in here any of your assets or liabilities. So that could be fixed assets that your charity owns, such as a building or a minibus or a PA system. It might include money owed to you, like gift aid. It might be things that you owe to others. So it could be liabilities that you have, like loans that you are paying off. Here we go. We've got your property assets. It might be investments. It's important. It's worth saying that assets and liabilities in receipts and payments accounting is very different to how this works with accruals accounting, in that you just simply state the asset and liability balances at a given point in time. So for us, at the end of each financial year, rather than trying to work out how much the value has changed month by month. The principle of materiality within accounting means that you don't need to spend loads of time trying to add up, the £3.45 that you owe Bob at year's end, or the value of the old laptop that you have in your office. Your focus should be on the key assets and liabilities that need to be added. And for some charities, that might mean that nothing needs to be added. And if you're not sure about this, we would just recommend you chat to your independent examiner, and they're the person you need to speak to about whether you need to put these assets or liabilities on your statement. And then our final check, number 10, is our closing balances. So we started with our opening balances. We're going to finish with our closing balances. One of the key final checks is to ensure that you're happy with your closing fund balances, as these will carry over into your new financial year and become your opening fund balances for that year. So for us, that'll be for 2026. Once your accounts are signed off and submitted, you can't just go back and make changes to your 2025 financial year. So it's really important to check your key closing balances are correct before creating your year-end accounts. So as well as making sure we're happy with our balances on our assets and liability statement here, we're also going to review our fund balance on our fund movement summary. Again, we're going to go through our finance reports to find our fund movement summary report. You can see your closing cash balances again here on the right-hand side of the table. And top tips for this, where a restricted fund has little or no expenditure, we want to check for any expenditure that could be covered by the fund, but has been allocated somewhere else. So in a restricted fund here, we've got no expenditure here against the food bank fund. And that looks a little bit funny because we know the food bank has been running. We've been buying things for food bank. There has been expenditure. So this would flag up that we've probably we've been coding some of that to a different fund, a different category, and we need to have a look and review that. Another thing to look for is where a restricted fund balance is running really low. You might need to plan for this in terms of seeking additional income or expenditure being covered by a different fund. Once the balance of the fund becomes zero, just making sure that we're aware that there's a plan for what's going to happen for that fund. Note, fund balances typically shouldn't be negative. So if you have a negative fund balance, you will need to look to either recode expenditure to a different fund to bring it back up to zero, or potentially consider a fund transfer into that fund, again, to stop that fund balance being negative. You also may want to check where you've got funds where there's no further expenditure expected and it's a restricted fund, but the balance isn't zero. So you've finished all of your activities for a particular restricted fund. There's still some money left over. You can't spend it as unrestricted funds. So you just want to speak to either your independent examiner or maybe the charity commission about this, just to check what you can do with it, how you can use that fund, whether it needs returning. Your independent examiner or the charity commission are the people to talk to about that. So there we go. We've whistled through our checklist and we've done the things that we need to do before we create our accounts. And I'm going to hand over to Sam, who's going to take us through what to do when creating your accounts.
Thanks so much, Jack. That was really helpful in terms of the checks that need to be done before you try and create your year-end accounts. And those are really important because obviously if you don't do those checks, then the accounts that you create obviously won't be accurate. So I'm going to take us through what you do once you've completed those checks in terms of using the inbuilt template inside ExpensePlus to create your accounts. So if you haven't seen this already, within ExpensePlus, if you go to the sidebar menu and you go to year-end accounts and you click on this option, you will come to our inbuilt year-end accounts template, and we're going to select our 2025 financial year. Now, it's worth noting that if you don't wish to create your accounts yourself, or you don't feel confident doing this, then do speak to your independent examiner to see if they offer the option to create your accounts for you, as well as doing the independent examination. However, I would say that creating accounts on a receipts and payments basis inside ExpensePlus is really straightforward. So do just stick with me as I go through these different steps, because you may well find that actually you are able to do this yourself. Now you'll see that inside this screen there are a number of different tabs across the top of the screen, and we're going to work through these in just a second. You'll also see that inside the contents page, which is the one that we're in, you'll be able to see whether the different sections have been completed, in which case they'll say view/update, or whether they are incomplete, in which case they will show as incomplete for you on here. And so what we want to do is we want to work through these different sections inside this report, and I'm going to talk you through that now. So we're going to come to the legal and admin tab inside here. As you'll see, this is really basic details of your charity that need to be added here, along with the details of your charity trustees. So this tab is really straightforward. The next tab is the trustees written report, and this needs to be part of your accounts. However, if you take last year's trustees written report, you will be able to find that you'll be able to reuse most of the wording that you use for that. For example, the objectives of your charity will not have changed between your different financial years. So you should be able to simply copy and paste this from your prior year. Summary of the charity's main activities and achievements. Whilst this probably will have changed, lots of it probably will remain. And so if you want to create your accounts in a fairly efficient way, you would probably look to keep 50% plus of this the same as prior years, because lots of your activities will be the same, but add in the new kind of things that you've been doing as a charity in the financial year in question, along with any achievements in that financial year. There's a financial review section. Again, you can probably copy the kind of like the template that you've used previously, and you'll just need to update the any numbers and any wording inside that. If you have any funds in deficit, then you need to state this. Typically, you shouldn't have funds in deficit, and so that is really easy to populate. And then you need to state your reserves policy. And again, if you've done this in your prior year, that's a simple case of copying and pasting it over into this year. Obviously, if you've changed your reserves policy, then you would be updating the wording inside here. But again, it's really straightforward and easy to do. Next tab is the independent examiner's report. This is default wording for your that your independent examiner will use when examining your accounts. All you need to do, therefore, inside here is just to state your independent examiner's name and address, and then everything else can just remain. And then when you download your accounts, there's a place here for your independent examiner to sign to say they are happy. The next tab is receipts and payments, and this is bringing through your receipts and payments report inside ExpensePlus. But if you've completed all the checks that Jack's just talked through, then this is simply pulling that data from that report inside ExpensePlus. It's rounding the numbers to the nearest pound, as should be the case, and it's showing us all the data here, and we don't need to do anything. And this is one of the brilliant things about having an inbuilt template, is it's going to ensure that the accounts we create match with the data inside ExpensePlus. And if we've completed those checks, then we're going to be confident the data inside ExpensePlus is correct. Assets and liabilities statement. Again, this is pulling through the data from the place that Jack showed us when we were looking at the assets and liabilities report. And again, this is just pulling through the data, and again will be correct. We can see the different additional sort of assets and liabilities that were stated, which you also saw when Jack was showing you these. These just pull through, and again, there's nothing else that you'll need to do that. And finally, there's a notes section. There's a note section on your accounting policies. There is some default text that will appear here. Feel free to overwrite this if you would like, or you can again copy this from your prior year, because chances are your accounting policies won't have changed, but if they have, you can add any updates. You need to state whether any transactions from related parties. So related parties would be things like people like trustees or family members of trustees, close family members of trustees, or key management personnel, or close family members of key personnel, where you may need to state some related party transactions if that is applicable. If you're not sure, then click the eye icon. Again, if you're not sure, then speak to your independent examiner, who will be able to advise you. The movement of funds, this again is just pulled through from the fund movement summary report, which Jack mentioned. And so this just gets pulled straight into your year end. And there's a section for other optional kind of notes that you might wish to add. However, that is not required. So as I've gone through, you're like, hey, I can do that. And particularly because lots of the data just pulls straight through. The data that doesn't will default for you, and you can just amend it if you would like. And actually, if you created accounts in a prior year, then you can just go ahead largely and copy and paste the same text and just make sure that it's still relevant as you are creating accounts. Back to the contents page then. Once you have finished and you're happy with the contents of your year-end accounts, you can either download them to PDF or you can download them as a Word document. If you download them as PDF, obviously you won't be able to amend that. If you download them as a Word document, then you will be able to add any formatting changes you want. If you want to add some pictures into your trustees written report, you can of course do that as well. So feel free to choose the option that you would prefer inside here. There's one final thing that I'm going to mention, which is if you are in the if you are creating year-end accounts in ExpensePlus for the first time, but you've been using ExpensePlus for quite a long while, then when you come to your receipts and payments report, you may see that there is a warning option at the top of the screen, which is saying that for some of your categories, you still need to set a category type. If that's the case, just click through on the link and it will take you through to the category settings screen, where you can go through and you can set your different kind of different category types. It's also worth mentioning, if this is the first year of using ExpensePlus, then of course ExpensePlus will not know your prior year totals in terms of your income and expenditure, or rather receipts and payments. And so this column instead will have white boxes enabling you to fill out and copy across from your prior year accounts what the different kind of receipts and payments were for that prior year. And then the final thing I'm going to mention is you see how these are broken down in terms of the different kind of categorizations of your receipts and payments. If you would like to update this, then it is possible to do that. These are the default ones. We'd recommend you leave them unless you kind of have good reason to change them. But if you would like to change them, if you go to the cog icon in the top right hand corner, you go into categories, and then there's this option of edit category types. And this is where you can edit the different category types that you have If the delete is grayed out, that means you've connected some categories to that category type. We just need to disconnect them before deleting. Obviously, if they've not been connected, you can delete, and you can add other income and expenditure category types. And so these determine the breakdown that you are seeing inside this kind of receipts and payments section of your year-end accounts. So hopefully that is helpful, and this is what you need to do to create year-end accounts inside Expense Plus. I'm just going to change the screen share just to take us through the final section. And so once your accounts have been created then, so we're moving on to the final section in today's session, there are three kind of key things that you need to do. The first of which is independent examination. So if you've created accounts and your charitable income is over £25,000, then before submitting accounts to the Charities Commission, it's important that you get them independently examined. Who needs to do this or who can do this? Well, independent examiners need two things. They need to be independent. That's the first point. The second is they need the necessary skills and experience to carry out an independent examination. So in terms of being independent, they cannot be a trustee of your charity. They can't be an employee. They can't be a beneficiary. They can't be a major donor. And they can't be someone related to any of those categories that I've just mentioned. It goes without saying an independent examination needs to be independent. So for example, my church, for example, if they their income was kind of low enough and we need an independent examination, we could get someone, for example, that has the right experience and skills in a different church, maybe that is in our city, and we could ask them to do the independent examination. That would be fine. They just can't actually be connected to your particular charity. In terms of skills and experience, the Charities Commission recommends that examiners for charities with income of over £100,000 have a qualification in charity finance or are a qualified accountant. And so again, just bear that in mind. It's worth remembering that an independent examination is a brilliant chance for someone else who has the right skills and experience to look at what you've done and go, hang on a minute, that doesn't seem right. Obviously, if you've worked through the checks that we've talked through, then chances are you're going to get 99% of stuff absolutely spot on. But the whole point of an independent examination is for someone else to tell you what, or to advise you what might be wrong, and kind of say, look, I'm not quite happy with this. Essentially, if you're not a qualified accountant or a kind of really experienced with fund accounting, it's a great chance for someone else to say, hang on a minute, did you not know that is actually restricted income? You need a separate restricted fund for that. It's a brilliant chance to give your trustees confidence that the accounts that you're submitting are correct. Now, it is important to remember that just because someone is an accountant, and they may well be a brilliant accountant with loads of experience of creating business accounts, that does not mean they have the right skills and experience that are needed for charity accounting. And we see this all the time, and this can be really problematic with independent examiners not able to spot really basic fund accounting mistakes. Because if they're a business accountant, they will not understand necessarily fund accounting at all. And so, for example, if I were to review kind of your accounts and started looking through it and start going through some of those checks Jack's looked through, I start looking through your general fund, I might be, oh, that's a grant. I wonder why that's unrestricted. Surely that's got some restrictions around it. You'll find that independent examiners miss even really basic things like that where they don't have the right skills and experience. So don't just assume because you've got someone that is a qualified accountant that they actually understand fund accounting. And this can cause problems because mistakes aren't spotted. And worse, your independent examiner is the person that you want to go to when you've got a fund accounting question. So you're not sure, I've got this money, I'm not quite sure whether it's restricted or not. And if they aren't able to correctly advise you, then essentially you're no further forwards. The other problem that we see is charities paying far too much for independent examination. And if you think this might be the case for your charity, then we would highly recommend you get 2 or 3 quotes from different companies. And now remember that it's up to your trustees to choose your independent examiner. It's not the other way around. So if you're not happy with either the service or the price or the advice that you're getting from your independent examiner, then do check out other options that are available. And for me, the cheapest price is not the right thing to be going for. You want to be going for someone that's actually got really good experience with fund accounting that you know is going to do a great job, because as I've mentioned, this is the chance for someone else that actually knows what they're doing to be able to look at your accounts and to help advise you where you might be getting a few things wrong. If you're not sure where to start, then we'd highly recommend checking out either Wyatt and Co. or Stewardship as two options for exploring with independent examination. There are lots of providers out there, and the reason that we mention these two is not because we get any benefit from doing so. It's because they are both brilliant. They both those options fully understand Expense Plus. They're brilliant. They understand fund accounting, and they're really helpful for the churches and charities they work with. So that's why we mention them. Now, if you use either of those two independent examiners, then when you come to year end, you will be able to set them up with access to your system by going to settings, and you can go to system settings, organization settings, and then inside here we can just go and click and say, yep, actually our independent examiner, we've chosen Stewardship, and we can select them in here, and that will give them access and their team access to all of the stuff they need inside our version of Expense Plus. They'll have read-only access, so they can't change anything, but they will be able to carry out their independent examination without the need for you to send a load of information across to them, which might be what you're used to doing. If you don't use either of those two independent examiners, that's absolutely fine. You can obviously choose which independent examiner you use. If you go to settings and you go to users, then if you set up your independent examiner, so you need a name and an email address, you can select the role of independent examiner or auditor. This, in a similar way, will give them read-only access to all of your system and avoid the need to send a whole load of data over to your independent examiner. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of how you set up and give your independent examiner access. I'm just going to switch back the screen share back to this screen. So a few other notes then to let you know about. So I mentioned that you don't need to send your independent examiner loads of information because they'll be able to get to all of your financial reports. They'll be able to view receipts and documents and gift aid claims and all of that sort of stuff inside Expense Plus. The thing that they are likely to still want is PDF copies of your bank statements so that they can check that the transactions that have been uploaded and reconciled within Expense Plus do match your actual statements. And so it's worth also checking upfront, is there anything else that your independent examiner might need? Now, it's worth bearing in mind that whilst an independent examination is typically really quick, it's not a full audit. It's a really kind of quick thing, which is why we recommend you check out about price if you think you're paying far too much for an independent examination. And so it is really quick, but it's worth bearing in mind that your independent examiner, particularly if they are working with, if they're really good, they'll be working with lots of different churches and charities. Whilst the turnaround time kind of for your accounts could be quite quick, they are likely to have lots of different clients all asking for independent examinations at the same time. And so it is worth checking up front kind of the expectation around turnaround time. And it's also worth not leaving it until 5 to 6 weeks before the deadline to try and get your accounts to them. You're going to cause yourself a lot of kind of stress unnecessarily. We'd recommend to kind of get cracking with creating your year-end accounts maybe 1 month after your prior year ends. It will give you plenty of time to do all the stuff you need, and you can file those accounts in really, really good time. And your independent examiner, when you use them, may come back to you with a list of questions having looked at your accounts. For example, they might spot that the trustees that you've listed in your accounts don't fully match with those on the charity commission, or they might ask for clarity on a related party transaction, or they might come back and ask you about what your internal kind of financial controls are like for the charity that you have. And I would just stress that that is perfectly normal, and there's actually a brilliant sign that your independent examiner is doing a proper, thorough job of examining your accounts by asking those questions. So that's okay, and do just bear in mind, again, build that into the time plan, that they may well want to come back to you with questions, and they're there to try and help you. So if they're asking you questions about the kind of like the controls and measures you have in place, then they're doing that from a point of view of trying to help you ensure you have the right structures and governance in place. Okay, the next step in this kind of final section then is accounts sign off. And so once your accounts have been independently examined, you'll need to circulate those accounts to the other trustees. So all trustees need to have sight of your accounts and a chance to ask any questions that they might have. The typical way this is done is your accounts will be sent out maybe a week ahead of a trustees meeting. They'll get discussed as part of that meeting, and then in the minutes of that meeting, it will be written that the trustees have agreed to sign off the accounts for this particular financial year. Once that's done, one of the trustees will need to actually physically kind of sign off the accounts on behalf of the other trustees. Obviously, your independent examiner will need to sign those accounts as well. And there's spaces in that template that we've looked through to do that. And then you'll be ready to submit your accounts to the Charities Commission. Now, in terms of submitting accounts then, the final point in this section This is really easy to do. If you haven't done it already, you just need access to the Charities Commission portal for your particular charity. If you don't have this, it's worth establishing up front who does have the permission, can have access to the Charities Commission portal. And if not, then you obviously need to contact the Charities Commission to get the access that you need to be able to submit accounts. So that's, again, another thing that's worth just considering up front. Now, once you're on the Charities Commission portal, it is really straightforward to upload your accounts to Charities Commission. It's literally kind of the click of a button. It will take you a few minutes. However, they do at the same time use this opportunity of you submitting accounts to ask you a whole load of questions about your charity. Bits of information like, what's the largest donation you've had into your charity during that year? Or what's the largest gift that your charity has given during that financial year? And so we're going to include a link either in the chat now, or we'll include it in the kind of follow-up to this session. But we've got a brilliant help guide article which lets you know how you can find most of that information in the different screens inside ExpensePlus, and that will just really help you with filing accounts, because whilst the account part is simple, the questions they ask you, and there are often lots and they often add more each year, they do just take a little bit of working through when you're submitting accounts. So we're near the end of today's session. We have covered the key checks and tasks that need to be done before creating accounts, and Jack did a brilliant job of taking us through those 10 key checks. I've talked you through how to create accounts with the inbuilt template inside ExpensePlus, and in this final section, we've just talked through the different things you need to do once you've created accounts in order to submit them to the Charities Commission. I hope you found this session helpful. If you have any questions, now is the time to pop them in the Zoom chat. We will move on to the Q&A time in just a second. For those watching this recording, thank you so much for joining us today. For those that are joining us live, then please do stick around for the Q&A, and now's a great chance to pop your questions in the Zoom chat.